They will never tell you this. Not your parents, not your teachers, not even the men who pretend to be your mentors. Because if you ever truly understood it, you would stop living the way society expects you to live. You would stop chasing approval, stop bending your neck for scraps of affection, and instead, you would stand alone, untamed, and terrifyingly free. Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher most people only associate with gardens and pleasure, left behind a truth so uncomfortable that it has been buried beneath centuries of lies. He claimed that the happiest man is not the one with the wife, the family, the status, or the applause. The happiest man is the one who dares to walk alone, who chooses friendship and self-mastery over chains of obligation. But think about what this means in today's world. From the moment you were born, you've been told that happiness is only real if it's shared with someone else, that to be single is to be broken, incomplete, a man not yet fulfilled. Yet look closer. Look at the marriages rotting from the inside, the men drained of their spirit, the ones who traded their freedom for comfort and ended up enslaved by both. This is the secret most will never accept. That single men, those who refuse to kneel before convention, may actually live closer to true happiness than anyone else. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Epicurus is often remembered as the philosopher of pleasure, the one who preached gardens, wine, and endless indulgence. But this is the lie that history has written over his name. In reality, his teaching was the opposite. He warned against blind indulgence. He believed the pursuit of status, wealth, and even traditional romance is what destroys men. For Epicurus, happiness was not in chasing more, but in needing less. And here lies the brutal truth. A man who frees himself from unnecessary attachments, especially those society pressures him into, will always live lighter, freer, and closer to real joy. Epicurus lived in a time of chaos. Greece had already seen its golden age collapse. Empires were rising and falling, and men everywhere were clinging to politics, family, and conquest in hopes of finding stability. But Epicurus rejected it all. He turned his back on public life and instead created his famous garden, a place where men gathered not to drink themselves to death or chase women, but to strip life down to its essentials: bread, water, friendship, and philosophy. To outsiders, this looked weak, even cowardly. But for those inside, it was liberation. Why? Because Epicurus saw what most men never dare to admit, that the world's definition of happiness is a trap. Marriage, power, recognition, these are not guarantees of joy but sources of anxiety. They tie your worth to something outside of you, and once you depend on those things, you are no longer free. You are chained. Think about it. The modern man is told that to be respected, he must secure a partner, build a family, and climb the social ladder. But how many men are crushed under the very weight of these demands? How many lose themselves, compromise their soul, and wake up realizing they are living a life they did not choose? Epicurus would say they are not living at all. They are merely performing a role that society cast for them. The garden was not about running away from life, but about facing it without illusions. Epicurus argued that most suffering comes from two things: unnecessary desires and fear of loss. The man who believes he needs a woman to validate him will live in constant anxiety. Fear of rejection, fear of betrayal, fear of abandonment. But the man who finds peace within himself, who sees companionship as a choice rather than a necessity, is untouchable. And this is where his teaching collides violently with modern culture. Because to say that single men may actually live happier, freer lives than married men is to spit in the face of everything society builds itself upon. Family units, consumer markets, even political systems depend on men binding themselves to responsibilities they did not create. A man who steps away, who declares, "I do not need what you are selling," is dangerous. Epicurus' philosophy is not about hedonism, it's about sovereignty. The ability to stand in the storm of life and remain unshaken because nothing outside of you controls your peace. He taught that true pleasure is simple, that food, friendship, and freedom are enough. And when you no longer crave more than this, you become immune to manipulation. Consider this: most men today live with quiet despair, endlessly scrolling, endlessly comparing, endlessly chasing some idea of completion. They believe that once they have the right partner, the right house, the right validation, they will finally be whole. But Epicurus would laugh at this. Because the man who believes happiness is always somewhere outside of him will never arrive. He will chase until his last breath and still feel empty. Epicurus flipped the script. He said, "Stop chasing what enslaves you. Stop mistaking approval for joy. Happiness is not given by others, it is grown within." And here's the unsettling consequence. If you take his words seriously, you begin to see why single men, those who resist being pulled into society's machinery, may be closer to truth than the rest. They are not weaker for being alone, they are freer. They are not failures for rejecting convention, they are rebels. This is why Epicurus was feared, why his name was smeared through history. A man who needs nothing cannot be controlled. A man who chooses solitude, who surrounds himself with friends rather than obligations, becomes dangerous to systems that depend on his obedience. Epicurus' lesson is brutal but liberating. Most men live chained not because the world forces it, but because they believe chains are necessary for love, respect, and meaning. But the man who cuts them off discovers a joy that is quieter, harder, but infinitely deeper. And so the hidden truth remains. Single men are not broken. They may in fact be the only ones who have glimpsed what happiness really is. Epicurus' warning against unnecessary desires was not meant for a world of endless advertising, dating apps, and social media. Yet his words strike harder now than they did 2,000 years ago. Because today men are told from the moment they can walk that they are incomplete. Incomplete without success, without status, without a partner to prove their worth. And this constant whispering of inadequacy is what keeps them restless, distracted, and enslaved. Look at relationships. A man raised on modern culture is taught that his highest achievement is to be chosen by a woman. That his validation, his proof of masculinity, lies not in who he is, but in whether or not someone else accepts him. He goes on endless dates, writes witty texts, swipes for hours, all the while feeling that every rejection is a reflection of his value as a human being. Epicurus would have called this madness. He would have said, no man should tie his happiness to another's approval. Because the moment you do, you hand them the keys to your soul. And yet, isn't this exactly what weakens men today? When a woman withdraws, when she criticizes, when she leaves, so many men collapse. They spiral into despair because their foundation was built on sand. But a man who understands Epicurus' truth, who realizes that peace comes not from being chosen, but from choosing himself, cannot be broken this way. He may grieve, yes. He may hurt, but he does not lose himself. He remains whole because he never outsourced his happiness in the first place. Society reinforces this lie in other ways too. Walk down any street, open any screen, and you will see advertisements selling love, status, and belonging. Buy this car, and you'll be admired. Wear this brand, and you'll be respected. Get married, and you'll finally be a real man. But Epicurus exposed this game centuries ago. All of these promises are illusions. You chase them, you pay for them, you build your life around them, and yet they never deliver what they promised. Instead, they leave you emptier than before, because now you've invested years of your life in something hollow. This is why single men who resist these illusions are not to be pitied, they are to be feared. Because they are no longer bound by the chains that corporations, governments, and even religions place on them. They no longer serve as easy consumers, desperate for validation, buying whatever they are told will make them desirable. They no longer serve as predictable husbands or workers, tied to mortgages and responsibilities that keep them obedient. They become men who cannot be easily controlled because their needs are minimal and their peace comes from within. Think about how radical this is. The man who does not need to impress, who does not need to perform, who does not need constant approval, is free to live on his own terms. He can take risks. He can walk away from toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, and hollow communities, because his happiness is not tied to them. And the world does not know what to do with a man like this. It cannot bend him. It cannot scare him. He is, in the truest sense, untouchable. But let's be honest, living this way is not easy. To reject society's illusions requires strength that most men do not cultivate. It means facing solitude without fear. It means enduring criticism, mockery, and misunderstanding from those who cannot imagine life outside the script. It means building a sense of self so strong that the absence of external approval does not crush you. And this is why Epicurus' teaching feels so heavy, because it demands responsibility. It demands that you stop blaming the world for your misery and admit that most of your suffering comes from your own unnecessary desires. Look at men's personal growth today. How many chase motivation videos, productivity hacks, or endless courses, believing that one day they'll be enough? Epicurus would shake his head. He would say, "You are already enough, but you refuse to believe it. And so you search endlessly for what was never missing." He would remind you that the simplest things, food, shelter, peace, and genuine friendship, are the only things you truly need. The rest is vanity. The rest is chains. This is not to say Epicurus denied love or companionship, but he stripped them of their illusions. He saw friendship, not romance, as the highest form of human connection, because friendship is chosen freely, without the same demands for possession or validation. A friend strengthens your soul, while a relationship often tempts you to surrender it. In his garden, men lived together in brotherhood, not because they rejected love entirely, but because they understood that clinging to it could enslave them. Now think about the men you know today. How many are trapped in marriages they resent, but cannot leave because society tells them it is shameful? How many stay in relationships where they are diminished, drained, and disrespected, all because they fear being alone? Epicurus would say these men are already alone, because they have abandoned themselves. The man who chooses solitude, who embraces it as a space of strength, is never truly alone. The man who fears solitude will never find peace, no matter how many people surround him. And here lies the brutal mirror Epicurus holds up to us. Are you living your life because you chose it, or because you feared the alternative? Did you marry? Did you pursue wealth? Did you cling to status because it truly fulfilled you, or because you were terrified of what it would mean if you didn't? This question unsettles us because it reveals that so many of our choices are not free, but reactions to fear. And fear, Epicurus believed, is the true enemy of happiness. He taught that death itself is nothing to fear, because when death comes, you are no longer there to experience it. The greater tragedy is not dying, but never truly living. And how many men live half-lives because they are too afraid to step outside the expectations placed on them, too afraid to risk solitude, to risk rejection, to risk being misunderstood? Epicurus would say these men are already dead in spirit, because they never found the courage to exist on their own terms. So when we look at single men who are dismissed as failures, Epicurus invites us to see something different. To see men who may have touched a truth deeper than convention. To see men who, stripped of illusions, walk lighter and freer than the rest. They may not look successful by society's standards. They may not have the perfect family photo or the enviable career, but they have something rarer, a peace that cannot be taken from them. Epicurus' wisdom can feel abstract, but it was never meant to remain in the clouds. It was meant to cut into daily life, to be lived like a discipline, a way of sharpening the soul against the constant illusions of the world. His message to men is clear. If you wish to be free, you must learn to separate what is essential from what is poison. The first lesson is simple but brutal. Never surrender your peace for the illusion of love. Epicurus did not deny companionship, but he warned against confusing desire with necessity. A woman may enhance your life, but she is not its foundation. When you build your identity on her approval, you have already lost yourself. So the command is this: never beg to be chosen. Choose yourself first, and let others enter your life only if they align with that strength. The second lesson is a warning against vanity. You do not need status, luxury, or endless possessions to be whole. Every time you measure yourself by the car you drive, the clothes you wear, or the likes you collect, you are building a prison out of shadows. Epicurus would say, strip yourself of false needs. Ask with ruthless honesty, do I need this to live, or do I only need it to impress? If the answer is the latter, cut it away. Freedom grows only in simplicity. The third lesson is to master solitude. Most men fear being alone because silence exposes the truth of who they are. But the man who cannot sit in solitude is not a man. He is an addict, forever running from himself. Epicurus' garden thrived not on constant distraction, but on the richness of stillness and friendship. Practice solitude until it no longer terrifies you. Learn to eat, walk, and think without needing someone else to validate your existence. The man who makes peace with solitude becomes untouchable. The fourth lesson is to recognize that fear is the root of enslavement. Fear of death, fear of rejection, fear of judgment. These are the chains that make men obedient. Epicurus tore these chains apart. Death, he said, is nothing to fear, because it is the one thing you will never experience. Rejection is nothing to fear, because it only reveals who is not aligned with you. Judgment is nothing to fear, because those who mock you are themselves enslaved. The only real danger is to waste your life in chains you never needed to wear. The fifth lesson is to treasure friendship above all fleeting pleasures. Epicurus knew that true companionship was not built on desire, but on mutual recognition of the soul. Friends who stand by you in truth are rarer and more precious than lovers who fade with time. A friend strengthens your peace, while a shallow romance often disturbs it. So cultivate brotherhood, cultivate loyalty, and never sacrifice genuine connection for the cheap validation of being admired. The sixth lesson is to simplify your life until happiness becomes obvious. Most men are miserable not because they lack, but because they are drowning in excess. Too many desires, too many comparisons, too many false promises. Epicurus taught that when you strip away the unnecessary, joy reveals itself in the simplest things: a shared meal, a clear sky, a quiet moment of reflection. Ask yourself, if I lost everything tomorrow, what would I still need to feel alive? That is your real wealth. Everything else is weight. And the final lesson: stop living for appearances. Epicurus would remind you that men destroy themselves by playing roles they secretly despise. They pretend to be successful, respected, loved, but behind the mask they are restless, empty, and afraid. Do not live to be seen. Live to be free. The world will always misunderstand you, mock you, or ignore you. Let it. Your task is not to be admired, but to be at peace. The admiration of others cannot heal a restless soul, but the mastery of yourself can. These are not gentle suggestions. They are weapons. They are shields against a world that profits from your insecurity. And if you resist them, if you cling to the illusions Epicurus warned against, you will remain enslaved, always chasing, never arriving. But if you live them, you will discover something terrifying and liberating at once. Happiness was never outside you. It was always yours to claim, if only you dared strip away everything false. Epicurus' truth is merciless in its simplicity. Happiness, he said, is not in the arms of another, not in the applause of the crowd, not in the glitter of possessions. It is in the quiet mastery of one's own soul. Yet this truth is the very reason most men will never touch it, because to live it requires courage. Courage to reject illusions, to endure solitude, to face the silence within without flinching. Most men will keep chasing. They will marry because they are afraid to be single. They will spend decades climbing ladders that lead nowhere. They will drown themselves in distractions, in pleasures that fade, in appearances that crumble. And when death finally comes, they will realize too late that they never truly lived. Epicurus' warning echoes like a thunderclap across centuries. The tragedy is not death itself, but the wasted life that precedes it. But some men, a rare few, will hear his voice and awaken. They will recognize that true freedom lies not in being chosen, but in choosing. Not in being admired, but in being at peace. Not in possessing more, but in needing less. These men will walk differently, lighter, unshaken. The world will not understand them, and women may even fear them, because such men cannot be manipulated or controlled. They radiate a strength that does not depend on anyone else. This is why Epicurus' philosophy is not soft, but dangerous. Dangerous to a society that thrives on weakness. Dangerous to relationships built on dependency. Dangerous to institutions that profit from fear. A man who embraces Epicurus' hidden truth becomes unpredictable, untamed, and free in a way that unsettles everyone around him. And yet, this danger is exactly what makes him alive. The single man who has stripped himself of false desires does not walk in bitterness, but in clarity. He does not reject love, but he does not beg for it. He does not despise society, but he refuses to be enslaved by it. He lives on his own terms, unshaken by rejection, untempted by vanity, unafraid of solitude. That is why, perhaps without knowing it, so many fear such men, because they reveal by their very existence how much of our lives are built on lies. So the question remains, will you keep chasing illusions, forever restless, forever unfulfilled? Or will you dare to walk the harder path Epicurus revealed, the path of stripping away until only truth remains? The answer is yours. But remember this, the man who chooses simplicity, courage, and peace cannot be broken. And that man, whether single or not, is the only man who is truly free.